The Hollow keeps its own. Document left by Gary Evans, lumberjack, Wichita, Kansas. Found on a battered yellow legal pad, handwriting steady but heavy, as if each sentence had to be pushed to the page. I'm writing this the way I work a log on the sawbuck. Steady, square, no flourish, no nonsense. If you're reading it, I'm already back in Kansas and keeping my porch light on every night like a fool. I don't want to think about Halloween again, not for a long time. But I promised two people I put this down so it doesn't slide out of my head and get smoothed over into a camp story. It happened. I was there. I am not a storyteller. I swing an axe for a living, and when I'm not doing that, I build computers. Threading cables through a case is the only place I like to see a tangle. This is about Sleepy Hollow, New York, and the thing that rides there when the days get short and the leaves turn slick as wet coins. It's about how I went for a Halloween hike because I like quiet places and old names, and how I came back with mud in the seams of my boots that won't wash out even after 3 scrubs with a stiff brush. I'm not writing this for clicks or for fun. I'm writing it because the Hollow keeps its own, and if you go, it will try to keep you too. I escaped, and what I have at the end is a warning. Take it or don't. But if it's getting toward the end of October and you're near the old Dutch church, leave the bridge for the dead. I left Wichita before dawn and pointed my pickup east, radio off most of the way, just the sound of tires and rain. The forecast said showers tapering in the evening, which is lies and poetry. If you've ever done woods work in a real rain, you know it's like standing in a grey tent that someone is shaking from the outside. You hear more than you see, you feel more than you hear. Sleepy Hollow looks like a place half here and half remembered. It's got those low streets that swoop a little, and the old church with its stones shining like wet loaves of bread. The river is not far away. Everything smells like damp iron, wood smoke and leaf mold. I checked into a room above a coffee shop. The building had slanted floors, a window that didn't fully close, and a wallpaper pattern that kept repeating a 4-petaled flower, like a compass rose pointing nowhere. The owner gave me the keys and a pamphlet about legendary Sleepy Hollow, smiling the way small-town business owners smile when they don't know whether you're here for the story or the joke. I'm here to walk, I said. Just needed someplace old to do it. Plenty of old, he said. Don't walk after dark. I say that to everybody. People out here speak in the plural when they mean the woods. Plenty of old, plenty of dark. I dropped my bag, wiped my boots, and took a slow lap around town. I passed the churchyard and the old Dutch burying ground, where tilted, tin tombstones lean like teeth too big for a jaw. There was a woman kneeling by a grave, the hood of her raincoat up, her gloved fingers brushing leaves of a name. She glanced up once and then back to what she was doing. That's the thing about places like this. Grief doesn't feel like a performance there. It's housekeeping. I had supper early, stew and bread, and sat with my phone for a while, loading offline maps and downloading a few PDFs about the area. I've read Irving's story since I was a kid, the school book version and the one with the illustrations of the horseman with a jack-o'-lantern like a wound that learned how to burn. Those stories say he was a Hessian soldier, yet taken by a cannonball during the war. He rides at night looking for what he lost. He can't cross consecrated ground. If you make it to the old Dutch church bridge, sometimes he stops. That's the lore. My line of work has its own. Measure twice, cut once. Never stand where the tree wants to fall. Before you step in, check what you'll step out on. I keep that lore because it keeps me, and it's never lowered me into a bad hole. I should have kept the same discipline with the hollow. I didn't. On the next day, October 29th, I woke up early. Rain soft and steady, roof sticking. I packed light, day pack with water, first aid roll, headlamp, flashlight, tinder, and a ferro rod out of habit, a small coil of paracord, folding saw, and my belt axe. It's not a showpiece. You use an axe long enough, you wind up naming it. Mine is just axe. Hickory half-toil, dark, 3.5-pound head. I've owned it longer than any truck. On a whim, I slid an old relic into the zip pocket of my pack. A brass button I'd bought at a flea market last summer, stamped with a crown and a number. The seller said it was European and probably military. It rolls nice in the fingers when you're thinking. It had become worry beads for me. I mention it here because the hollow likes to see what's in your pockets. Rain had slicked the path past Phillipsburg Manor and the church. The leaves underfoot were half ground and half bone. In the daylight, the burying ground looks too small to hold all the dead it holds. The map I downloaded laid a hiking loop out toward the reservation, then a swing back along the Pocantico, brushing the old sides and the modern trails like two palms almost touching. A sign near the trailhead carried the usual wordings: stay on marked paths, respect property, no fires. And at the bottom, in a smaller font, something that stuck to me: seasonal advisory, increased nighttime closures around Halloween. For your safety, exit woods before dusk. You could read that as crowd control. I read it as advice. I planned a simple one, out by 10, back by 3. Only a little look at the bridge from a distance. Enough to say I saw it, not enough to make a story of it. The hollow like stories, it's been fed on them for 200 years. That's a lot of fat on a legend. I walked, rain softened. The air had that cold apple smell that reminds you you're not the first person to pass through a place. It makes you into a thread someone else started. Around noon, I reach a shoulder of the trail where the trees broke just enough to give a view back toward the church and the road. Through the gray, I could make out a little parade of decorations, orange flags, a line of carved pumpkins on a stone wall, faces lit from within in the day, like they didn't care if the sun was up or not. People do that in late October, leave little burning faces around to domesticate the dark. I stop to drink and listen. The woods mutter when it's wet, but there are gaps. Walking a while out there, you start to hear the gaps more than the noise. There was a long one then, and after it, 3 spaced sounds like someone testing a hallway with their knuckles. Clop, clop, clop. I've heard horses a lot. A horse on wet stone is a particular sound. It has a sizzle around the edges. I told myself there was a road nearby. There was. And a party there might be. And a horse. There could be. Then I heard a second thing, the little hiss, laugh that a candle makes when it eats a drop of rain. If the woods are quiet enough, you can hear a candle working. It spent that quiet on me like a tease. I should have turned. I didn't. October 31st, the first night, Halloween. I slept through the 30th with a hard rain playing its fingers on the roof. The 31st came on darker, and the coffee shop plugged a string of orange lights around its windows like a belt. The town started to change. Kids in caves, parents in parkas, local teens who've seen too many horror movies trying to spook each other, fake cobweb over real cobblestone, plastic bones hung on iron fences. The hollow winks a lot at itself in late October, the way an old boxer smiles when he lifts the belt one more time. There's power in that wink. There's also a bruise. I'd promised myself I'd be off the trails by afternoon. I meant it. By noon, I'd already hiked up to where the reservation's map turns from paper to mud in your hands, then back around toward the river. The rain eased into a speaking drizzle. The path I'd taken scraped the edge of the burying ground again, and from there you can see, through trees and time, the place where the old bridge was and the new road is. There is a replica bridge, the covered kind you see in paintings, a dramatization built for tourists. Pretty timber, good joinery, looks like the truth if you squint. But the old bridge site at the church, that's where the stories point. The ground there feels loaded, like wood with a nail you can't see. Your soul finds it just the same. By 3 I was back at the trailhead. The sky had gone that early bruise color you get before a storm really decides to sit on you, and the weather app on my phone showed a long blue smear coming up the river. I should have walked 2 blocks, sat at a bar, and told myself ghost stories in safety. I should have. Instead, I bought a hot cider from a street cart and walked back toward the church, just to look through the fence at the stones. Just to look, I told myself again, and that's the way fools talk themselves into holes. I saw him when I turned from the fence, a man in a colonial kit green, cold, dark with rain, tall boots, black horse, slicked to a dangerous shine. I thought, historical reenactment. The town must hire them for the tourists. He held a lantern and it smoked in the damp. The wind moved and the smoke didn't. It lay in a slow curve against nothing. A line of jack-o'-lanterns had been set along the churchyard wall, faces wide and foolish, teeth like fence pickets. Kids had stuck battery candles in most of them, but one, halfway along, had a real flame going, yellow and rich, fighting the mist. The horse turned its head toward the flame, and so did the rider. He sat too straight and too still. The lantern burned without ash. Then the rider reached down toward the pumpkin like a priest reaching for a wafer, and the flame inside it jumped. It climbed into his hand in a clean tongue of light, and the hollow in the pumpkin went dead and dark. The wick hopped from one mouth to another. I thought I was seeing a trick I didn't know. Magicians have pockets bigger than you think. But there was nowhere for the flame to go except where it went. And when the rider lifted his hand, what it held wasn't a lantern. It was a head. It burned in the shape of a head, a skull with meat, cheeks lit like charcoal at the edges, the eyes the color of a kiln. It made that same candle hiss every time a raindrop dared its surface. Each hiss carried more smell, tallow, iron, hair. The horse didn't stamp, it didn't breathe like horses do when they fog the air. It stood like a bad thought. The rider raised the burning head higher, so the light slid along his shoulders, and where you expect to see a neck, the fabric was gathered to a stump. Black, no blood, the way things are when blood is long dried. The soldier's coat was clipped at the throat with a brooch shaped like a crown. Water slid down the cloth and refused to enter it. That's how you know you're not looking at a man. Water doesn't refuse a man. Somebody not far away laughed, a real modern laugh. Fluorinated teeth, a phone in their pocket, and that laugh sounded like the bell of a bicycle when you're lying under it after the crash. It had nothing to do with this. The rider turned the burning head as if to see who'd laughed, and the flame made a shimmer in the rain. It caught on the wet of the stones, showing names in the Dutch that looks like English if you tilt it. Before I could move, the hooves struck. Clop, clop. Not a gallop, just a judge's step to ask for order. I backed up until the iron fence pricked my coat. The burning head turned toward me, and the mouth in that flame. A mouth is the last thing that should have edges pulled tight. Not smiling, not snarling, considering. Then thunder cracked overhead, flattening everything, and the light went out. The horse was gone. The path between me and the gate was empty. The last jack-o'-lantern, the one the flame had jumped from, sagged into itself like a throat. The only smell left was damp stone. I didn't run, I left. There is a difference. Running is an invitation, like you've stepped into a dance. I walked straight lines back to my door, shut it, latched it, set my axe against the frame, and sat down with my back to the bed. The room hummed in that way old buildings hum in a storm, wires, pipes, the drum. Skin of a roof stretched right to its limit. At 11, the humming stopped. That's when I heard the hooves. Not outside, not on the street. I heard them as if they were doing slow circles around the building, but on something that isn't there. You know the sound of a porch step when it's limber with age and a man stands on it? There's a complaint and then a sigh. It was that, but without the wood. Sound moving over ground that had forgotten itself. Clop. A pause long enough for the heart to count to 4. Then, clop. Circling, circling. I stood without knowing I'd stood. I took the axe in my hand, just a handle, just a head, and held it low. The way you hold a dog's collar when the dog's got a question. Not tonight, I said out loud. To my own surprise, my voice was steady. The hooves stopped, a long time later, long enough for me to count the nails in the floorboards closest to my boots. The rain came back hard, like a hand clapped over a mouth, and the sound was gone in it. I slept early in the morning and dreamt of what workmen dream, keeping your feet and finding your cut. When I woke, it was still Halloween by the calendar, but not by the light. The day felt used. The rain wasn't falling straight anymore. It came at a slant, the direction of the river. I told myself the first encounter could be acted out, the second could be nerves, the hooves could be some acoustical trick in a town that's been bending sound towards its story for generations. I told myself I'd go out one more time by daylight, skirt the churchyard, look toward the bridge, and walk back among people. If there's a cure for something in the woods, it's witnesses. I went. There's a narrow shop of Beekman with old books and older men inside. It smells like iodine and lemon oil. I ducked in because the rain had gone from steady to insult, and the man behind the counter, white hair, dark eyebrows, looked up without looking surprised. You know how some faces look like a closed door and some look like a window that has been left open? His was a door ajar. You look like a person who'll do what he was going to do anyway, he said. I'm going to walk, I said. Yes, he said, and then, as if it reminding himself not to sell snake oil, you'll be fine if you're back by dusk. He pushed a dish across the counter with a handful of objects in it. A bent nail, black with forged soot, a dull silver and onyx ring, 2 coins pressed flat by a train, and a brass button with a crown and a number stamped on it. It was almost the twin of the one in my pack. My fingers moved to it and the way your tongue moves to a cut. Buttons like that show up in this town every year, he said. Kids say they're plastic. People who know say different. Sometimes the ground spits up what you won't put back in. I fished my button out of my pocket. He looked at it without touching. Where did you get yours? He asked. Flea market in Kansas, I said. A man with a tray of old stuff. He sold you a question, the bookseller said. You carry it like an answer. Put it back where questions like that belong. This place eats them. When you do, you will feel lighter. Is this? Don't ask it the wrong way, he said. If you think he's just a story, you won't ask anything. If you think he's a man, you'll ask the wrong questions. Ask like you're giving something back to a place that's colder than it looks. How? He shrugged, the shrug of a man who knows but has learned the cost of knowing. Not on the bridge, before the bridge, where the ground remembers. He slid the dish back. He didn't ask me for money. He gave me a plastic bag for my phone and a look that wasn't quite pity. You're from out west, he said. You've got good boots. Use them. I used them. If you've never been in a wood as the light goes gray, you might think night falls straight down. It doesn't. It comes sideways, choosing which parts to take first. On Halloween, the hollow lets it in like a host who's late for his own party. Puddles stopped looking like water and started looking like holes. I came up on the burying ground from the side, skirting the church, keeping to the path where the soil still had some spring in it. The river said its piece behind the trees. The rain's many small voices had agreed on a single tone. I took the button from the pocket and rolled it in my palm. It felt heavy, but not in the way brass is heavy. Heavy like one of those old sugar cubes they don't sell anymore. Weight and crumble and memory all together. The crown on the face had been dumb, smoothed by 100 fidgets, and the number beneath it was almost gone. Only the knuckle of one digit remained, a 1 or a 7. The ground near the church is lumpy, like a quilt whose batting has shifted. The older graves hunch, the newer ones kneel. A square of earth near a grey stone had slumped in, the way soil does when something has been disturbed and then tamped by a light hand. I knelt beside it and pushed my fingers into the mud. It took my thumb like a mouth. Here, I said. It felt stupid, talking to dirt. I think this is yours. I pressed the button down until the mud folded over it like a lid. When I pulled my hand back, the water had filled the print, wasn't clear. It held a thin swirl of soot. I stood, I waited. A sound came from the trees, like a boot sole sliding on bark. Then another, not animal sounds, not squirrel or raccoon. Something measuring its own weight against the posture. I lifted my headlamp but didn't turn it on. Light is a confession in the woods. My eyes had the look I needed. That's when I saw him in the margin, between the split of two trunks, half in and half out of the dark. Not moving, not breathing, just the outline of a shoulder, too straight, and the coat that didn't move in the rain, the way cloth should. The horse took up less space than a horse takes, as though if you stitched around its outline, you could cut it out of the night with a sharp knife and never dull the blade. He did not lift the burning head this time. The darkness around where a head should be looked darker than any other darkness. I felt the old reflex of a man looking for a face to read and not finding one, inventing a face and fearing what he'd invented. He shifted enough for me to see the curve of saber tash at his hip, the kind of leather satchel cavalry used to carry orders. It was wet and not wet, like a word spoken under breath and aloud at once. The flap hung open, a finger's width. He stood there so long, I nearly stopped believing in him. That's one of the oldest tricks in a bad place. Give you enough time to doubt and then move once and remind you what's true. When he moved, it wasn't toward me. It was sideways, the way a hunting cat moves when it doesn't want the meal to notice. He put a tree between us and then he was nearer, and then a headstone, and then nearer again, never breaking that slow, precise pace. He was stalking, not to bite, but to guide, to push me toward the bridge. I backed up, one step at a time, my boots sliding just enough to let me know the ground was thinking about taking me down. The bell tower of the church clung to the rugged sky. The river smell got louder, wet stone and old leaves and iron. The bridge was a smear of darker dark between the trunks, a mouth you get to walk into with your eyes up. Not the bridge, I said. No. He continued. He would continue until the place that belonged to him ended and the place that didn't began, because that is the law written in the grain of Sleepy Hollow, the same law the story tells in both its school book and its old-timer versions. The horseman cannot cross consecrated ground. He can push you to the edge and make you jump yourself. I slipped once, hard, catching myself with the hand sunk to the wrist. Mud packed under my nails. When I stood, I realized there were others watching, shapes farther back. Not riders, not men, just the suggestions of watchers, the way fog watches. The hollow has things that like to see. They like to see the living test their own limits, They like a game on nights like this. I changed my angle. Instead of backing directly toward the bridge, I cut right and slid along the fence line. Iron to my left, Grace to my right. The rider's head turned, or the place where a head would be turned, and the coat gathered slightly, like bread trying to pull through a throat that had no pipe. It was a small admission. He hadn't planned on me choosing the fence. There's a trick in felling a tree near a house. You cut a wedge out of the side you want it to fall to, and then you make your back cut nice and clean, fast, decisive. You don't argue with lean, you work with it. I felt for the lean of the ground, the way the water would sheet, the way the roots would grip, and I made my cut. I jumped the fence. I don't recommend it. Iron will take a bite if you give it a lip. But I found a spot where it sagged, put my boot heel on the mid-rail, and went up and over in a two-part motion that I've used over stock fences in Kansas more times than I can count. I came down hard, rolled once, and came up with the axe in my hand and my back to the church wall. He had moved in that time, more than a horse and rider can move in 2 breaths. But he had done it anyway, and he was only a few strides from the fence, close enough that the dark around his missing head touched the iron and made it wet in a pattern that didn't match the rain. There was no screaming this time, no theatrics. He raised one arm, not the one with the saber tash, the other, palm forward, as if to hold a line in air. He made no sound. The night made the sound, a low exhale like a man who has taken a punch below the ribs, and hold his breath to not cry out. The wind in the trees took a step back and let me hear it. I stood with my axe at the low guard, the way you hold when the work isn't cutting but convincing. He didn't cross, he wouldn't, he couldn't. You're not the only thing that owns a rule, I said. Talking to the dead is foolish, so is talking to the living. I'm a foolish man when I've decided. He lowered his hand. The leather flap on the satchel moved a hair. The horse pawed once, not that stamping angry paw horses do, but something like a gesture. The edge of the coat where the neck ended shifted, as if the rider had tipped his head. Then he did what the hollow does when it doesn't want witnesses to swear a thing in daylight. He unmade himself, not by leaving, but by letting the night put itself back together around him where he'd been. The space that had been rider and horse was once again what it had been 100 years before and 100 years after. A gap between 2 trees and a slice of path. The watchers did the same. The fence collected the rain. The church held up the sky. The river threaded its old needle. The moment ended, not with a bang, but with a tight seam pulled shut. I stayed where I was long enough for my legs to begin to complain about the squat. Then I stood, cold water sliding down the inside of my sleeve and letting me know I'd be stiff tomorrow. I walked around to the gate and let myself back out onto the street with the polite stubbornness of a man leaving a bar when he's not done drinking but has decided his bed is more important than his pride. No one stopped me. A group of teenagers in plastic fangs and hoodies ran past shrieking with laughter. A grocery bag rustle of candy between them. Their noise was relief and pain, both. I slept with the light on, and when the hooves started up, circling, they didn't sound so confident. They sounded the way a dog sounds when it can't understand the fence that has always been there. 1st of November. Morning came cleaner. Not clear. The hollow doesn't do clear, but cleaner. The rain worked itself down into the soil where it could do something useful. The coffee shop opened its door and the bell above it chose a chime different than the one it had used the day before. Bells have moved too. I went back to the bookshop to give the old man back his look. He wasn't there. The bell chimed. The counter was empty. In the dish, the relics were gone. Someone had wiped the glass. My wet boot prints dimmed and disappeared while I stood, like the floor had decided it would not hold them. On my way out of town, I stopped by the church one last time, standing on the path just long enough to cross myself out, knowing why. I'm not a church man. I suppose I am a churchyard man, in that I work with wood and live with the regularity of its grain and the fact that the grain remembers the tree. Maybe that's all church is, the memory of things that stood when you didn't. I didn't tell anyone at the counter of the coffee shop what happened. You can't say it right, and if you say it wrong, it brings it back around. I drove west, somewhere in Pennsylvania. The sun shouldered the cloud aside and rolled along my door for 20 minutes. Every time I looked in the side mirror, there was nothing behind me but trucks and the faces of tired men and a woman eating a sandwich with both hands, steering with one elbow, moving forward, because forward is what you do. I slept in a motel and woke to my phone buzzing with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of a brass button on mud. Crown, number, thumb worn. No caption, no callback. I stared at it until the screen went to sleep on me. When I woke it to look again, the photo was gone. No message, no number. A phone is a slippery thing when a place like the Hollow wants to keep its paper trail to itself. The button I'd pressed into the earth wasn't in my pack anymore. That was fine with me. You don't keep a thing like that after the ground has accepted it. That's like wiggling a knife after the cut is closed to see if it will bleed again. 2 days later, back in Wichita, I unpacked my gear on the garage workbench. I keep a neat bench, drawers labeled, chisels wrapped, oil can always full. My axe wasn't there, where I'd put it. I looked behind the bench, under the bench, back in the truck. It wasn't there either. I found it next morning, propped against the back door, with its blade oiled and the rag tied around the haft in a knot. I hadn't tied since I was a much younger man and my hands hadn't known hard work yet. The rag smelled faintly of smoke that wasn't cedar and wasn't hickory and wasn't any of the good smokes that stick to camp coats. I untied it and wouldn't swear the knot undid the way knots undo. It felt like a jaw letting go. I scrubbed the axe head and rehoned the bevel. I checked the wedge and the haft. Work makes you feel sane after a thing like that. You return each surface to a job you can define. That night, November 3rd, at 11:32, the porch picked up a sound like a farrier at an empty shop. Slow, measured, unnecessary. Clop, clop, A horse on a floor that was never built. I stood at the window with the curtain half cocked and my hand on the sill. I've got a little carved cross hanging there, not from a religion, but from the habit of having something small that breaks the outline of a square. It hung still as a picture. I heard the sound circle once and then move away, like a man who forgot the thing he came in for and doesn't want to admit it. I slept, I woke, I wrote this. I think Sleepy Hollow is exactly what its name says. It's a dip in the earth where things lie down and do not fully wake, even when we walk through. I think stories keep it warm the way a hand keeps a stone warm in a pocket. I think people who live there have climbed over the fence so often they know where the iron bites and where it's low, and they keep their fingers. Outsiders hit the tall part and come away with scars. I think the horseman is a soldier, and also not a soldier. What he wants is simple in the way the wants of the dead are simple. What was taken should be returned. I think buttons have a way of finding their way to markets far from where they were cut loose. And people like me, buy them because we like to think we can hold history without paying for it. I think the Hollow knows when something that belonged to it is in a foreign pocket. I think he can't cross consecrated ground. I didn't test it because I didn't have to. The fence was enough. If you could find yourself near that bridge, and it is dark, and it is wet, and your bones have chosen a shiver that isn't just the weather, do not choose the bridge, choose the fence. Choose the stone, choose the door of the church, and knock if you have to. If you get the door open, sit inside and keep your head down until you're a day older than you are right now. I don't know if he can be banished. I don't know if the people who've tried are spitting into rain. Maybe the Hollow is a machine and the rider is the blade that moves when the gear is laid in. Maybe the only kindness we can repay is to put things back that aren't ours to admire. I don't know what watched me from the trees. I don't know whether it was curious or hungry or just keeping score. I don't know if anyone else heard the hooves the way I did, or if I carried the sound home with me in the pocket where the button used to be. This is what I know. If you go to Sleepy Hollow for Halloween because you think it will be cute, it might be. It also might cut. If you hear hooves that aren't on the road, you're not hearing a parade. If a fire jumps the way a cat jumps to a new perch without touching the space between, don't admire it. If you've got anything in your pockets with a crown on it, and you don't come from a family that keeps crowns, find dirt and give it back. If the ground looks slumped like a tired shoulder, don't walk over it. Walk around and nod to it, like an old man in a diner nods to another old man who's been there every morning as long as he remembers. I escaped because I remembered one law in time. Some lines are for the living and some are not. The living keep to theirs and leave the rest alone. I escaped because I gave back the thing that wasn't mine. I escaped because when it came time to choose a direction, I chose the one that didn't end with a bridge and a dare. If you're the kind of person who reads a thing like this and smiles because you don't scare easy, let me put this in a way you might respect. The Hollow is not impressed by your nerve. It is older than your show of it. It will lean on your nerve like a rotten branch and take you down with no effort. You want to keep your feet? Keep them out of places that have learned to love the weight of man sleeping. This is my warning. This is my work done. I have written the thing down and set it at your door. On Halloween, if you happen to be on that road and you happen to be walking past the church because it felt like the right kind of dare, don't. Cross the street, go where the lights are. If your friend wants to go down to the water to see the real bridge, make a joke and buy them a drink instead. If your hand strays to the fence, feel the wet iron and remember that it remembers you back. When it is late, and if you are unlucky enough to live where sound carries, and you hear the slow turn of hooves on a floor that isn't there, close your eyes and do nothing. You can't answer a call that old without losing your language. Let it circle once. Let it have the yard of the night. Don't open the door. Don't. The hollow keeps its own. Don't give it a reason to keep you. Last entry, November 7th. Axe oiled, porch light on, curtain pinned back with a sliver of iron and a bit of twine. I don't care if that's an old wife's trick. Old wives know the oldest things.